right into it.
James.
Raph.
Trivia update. Got some great news. As some of you know, we've been going to a pub where trivia occurs before the podcast.
That's right, yeah.
We always go to a pub before the podcast to work out what we're going to talk about. Trivia was occurring last week, and we actually participated.
Yep.
4th at halftime, 5th in the end. A little disappointing. That's fine. Happy to tell the listener, this week we were like, we shouldn't go to trivia again because we end up being there too long.
Yep.
And then we have too many drinks. We'll only stay if we're winning.
Mm-hmm. Well,
bad news. We were winning. we were coming first at halftime.
And just to set the stage a little bit, provide a bit of context, we are 2 people.
Yeah, we're a duo.
We're a duo. There were 10 teams, and most of them were a cluster of friends. Stacked. You know, they had 5 or 6 people on the team. We were winning with 2 people.
Yeah.
And just to give you a sort of a geographic sense, we were actually sat on a raised platform about 10 meters away from everyone else who was playing.
Yes.
Which,
like a mezzanine almost.
We were sitting on a mezzanine level of the pub, and you might say that's a perfect position in which to cheat. And I'm sure people at halftime were thinking exactly that.
Yeah, they were thinking, how can those 2 people be winning
Be beating all of us.
And why is that guy hooting and hollering?
How can they be slaughtering us at the level that they are without looking at their dang smartphones? Well, we did it honestly, but we then got absolutely smoked in the second half.
We got smacked. We just couldn't keep it together. The momentum just dried up. It started well because the first question of the second round was, what country is this? It's got an odd coastline. And we're like,
this is down around areas. That's Croatia.
We were going to do a whole goddamn podcast about countries with odd coastlines. And we're like, okay, goddamn, the momentum keeps up. It was all downhill from there, folks. What do we end up coming?
Oh, like
7th or something?
6 or 7. Folks, you just want to know that we're never going to get too far above our station.
Yeah.
We're a 100 IQ podcast.
Yes. I would
We're
say
down the middle.
Anywhere between 100 and maybe 108. And that's why you listen, right? That's why you listen.
You don't want eggheads. You don't want morons.
You want the type of guys who absolutely throw away a halftime lead.
That's exactly right. That's down round, baby. Anyway, we're talking about
the news.
A little company you may have heard of by the name of Alphabet.
Yes. And another little company you may have heard of by the name of Apple.
Google
and Apple.
Yep. You know, in true down round fashion, we record an episode. It tends to be the way that we record an episode and then it's immediately invalidated by some news that happens. That's just the way that the world works by virtue of the fact that we record on a Monday night.
Yeah. We did a whole thing about antitrust and then
we did
minute.
In the past couple of weeks, we did a episode about antitrust and the sort of the weird movement towards antitrust action in the United States over the past few years. And then not long after we recorded the episode and put it out into the world, very big antitrust event occurred.
Yeah. And the antitrust event, before you're like, antitrust, I thought these boys said they weren't lawyers. This touches on like multiple things that we've actually been talking about for literally years on Down Round. There's a bunch of things that we've been making references to, blah, 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 that all of this encompasses. Anyway.
It all came to a head.
It came to a head, yes, indeed. Do you want to discuss the actual judgment itself, or would you like me to do it?
I'm going to give you the top line thing, and then you can dive in.
Love that.
A district court judge in the US ruled that Google is a monopolist, and it is a monopolist in the realm of search, and that it essentially uses the power of deals to enforce
the art of the deal,
Donald Trump, to enforce its dominance in the world of search.
Yeah.
You know, Google search, if you ask anyone on earth, what's the search engine? They'll probably say Google. Might be a few freaks that say Bing, and there might be a few people whose hard drives you check and say DuckDuckGo.
Yeah. Awesome people who like to wait 10 seconds before their search answers who say
Perplexity.
perplexity.
Yeah.
Let's get into more of the details because it is interesting. So, primarily, what they basically what this judgment is about is, as I said, something that we talk about on Darren all the time is Google. Yes, they're a monopoly insofar as they have a market share well above the 85% or whatever it is that deems a monopoly. Being a monopoly is not illegal, but abusing your monopoly powers is illegal. So, as we've discussed time and time again, Google pays Apple to be the default search engine in Safari, including Safari on mobile. The judge basically said, like, this is wrong. You should not be paying Apple. You shouldn't be abusing your market position in order to create these contracts that enables you to further entrench yourself as a monopoly.
So, yeah, just as a reminder, as you know, Google, they come up with the innovation, the phenomenal innovation. The internet shouldn't just be, a portal like Yahoo, which has a list of cool websites you should go to. Obviously, they weren't the first to come up with the idea of a web crawler, but they turned it into, they're the first to commercialize it in a really major way. They crawled the web, they organized it, they made it so that you could access all this information that it had crawled via search inquiries. It turned out to be a really phenomenal business.
And automated it so that, like, if new websites exist or whatever, they will be indexed into the Google search.
They'll be automatically indexed.
It very quickly became the most popular website on the planet for good reason.
Yep, and we've talked a little bit over the last little while about various things that could challenge Google's stranglehold. AI and things like ChatGPT and chatbots and whatever are one of them. But that really still hasn't manifested. And obviously Google is doing lots of things in terms of Gemini and LLMs and what have you. But once Google was in the position where it was the number one, rival search engines have popped up over the years. Microsoft Bing being probably the most prominent of them.
Just Bing it.
Just Bing it. Everyone's always saying crap like that. Yes, there are like the privacy-focused one like DuckDuckGo.
And there's certain subscription ones and whatnot.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ones that have popped up. But no one seriously thinks that any of them have had a major chance of challenging Google's position. And one of the reasons, at least what this judge is alleging, and many people have alleged over the years, is that Google enforces its power by ensuring that it controls the touch points at which people actually access search.
Yeah.
And one of them, and the most prominent one, is the Apple iPhone.
Yeah. Again, so we've talked at length about Apple services revenue, which, once again, sorry if you're a real downy and you've listened to all our episodes, you will have heard us say this before, but Apple like to position their quote-unquote services revenue, and they do it in every earnings call as, and our services revenue. More people are tuned in to Apple TV and like list off like, and here are all the stars we have on our latest thing, and everyone's loving the new
season of Ted Lasso.
Yeah, everyone's loving Ted Lasso and
Severance and all this kind of stuff.
And so our services revenue is up year on year. Our gross margin on Apple services was 74% last quarter. They made $18 billion in profits from services such as our fantastic Apple TV, and everyone's listening to Apple Music in our services revenue. Again, we've discussed Apple TV and Apple Music is a small fraction of Apple services. Apple services is primarily they're Apple's 30%, well, I should say 15 to 30% cut of App Store revenue.
Yep.
Apple Care support subscriptions, which are less relevant in Australia because, like, we have a 2-year warranty by the law.
Yep.
It's quite nice that
the Australian consumer law? Yeah.
Yes. The Australian consumer...
It's the government has given you a magic password that you can be annoying to service staff with.
Absolutely.
Many countries don't have that right. People, you can walk into a retailer where you've purchased something and cite,
18 months later.
And cite Australian consumer law.
You're like, my Wi-Fi's been a bit flaky.
Yep.
I want a new router.
And they'll probably help you.
Well, they have to.
Yep.
They goddamn have to. Otherwise, they'll be locked up in jail.
And rightly so.
It goes in because in America, they don't.
They don't have that.
They don't have that shit. So it's like you have to pay in order to have warranties. Cool.
To be fair, if you're someone who's prone to breaking your phone,
there is
smashing, it's probably worth doing because you can get the cheaper broken device replacements or smashed devices.
But they don't break anymore, folks. You don't have to worry about that. The glass doesn't break. I've been caseless for 3 years. I've dropped this shit on tiles all the time. It's not broken. It's a little dented on the edges, but it's fine. Apple Pay transactions, they're cut, which I think is like 3% or something like that. iCloud services, and primarily Google gives them 33% of all of their ad revenue on iPhone.
Yeah.
And that's really the kicker here, folks.
Which amounts to
20 to $25 billion a year.
Yeah.
About a quarter / slightly more of all of this services revenue is them getting, like Google just transferring every quarter, $7 to $8 billion. Here you go, guys. Just for the default on Safari being Google.
Yeah. No, if you break that out, imagine a company that made, for its entire business, everything it did, $22 billion a year in revenue.
Then put the profit margin on that at 99%.
Yep.
Probably higher.
That automatically makes it basically one of the largest businesses in America and therefore the world. Is just that one, free transfer of money essentially between Google and Apple.
Yeah.
And as you say, the entire purpose of that is to ensure that when you open up Safari on your iPhone and you type something into the unified URL / search bar at the top, without you having to interface or do anything, when you open up your lots of devices and browsers and whatever, when you first open them, will say, do you want to select a preferred search engine? This doesn't. You're not being asked if Google is your default. It just is. And I don't know what the figures are on how many people actually dive into Safari settings and change it to Bing or change it to whatever.
You can imagine it'd be very low.
It would be single digits, if that.
Yeah, absolutely. The other context, so that's one piece of context. Apple services revenue is primarily Google handing Apple money just to be a default. So that is actually like a percentage of the ad revenue, as I said. So, it's not like they work out a contract for like a set amount. It's just Apple get around 33 to 35% of all ad revenue. Pretty nice. Second piece of context to bring up. I did a post about this because now I'm an author. I'm a Substacker. I did a post about this a few months ago. People are bringing it up more and more now. I like to feel like I was third to post about it. I don't know who 1 and 2 were.
Third's good.
I doubt it was me.
Third.
It's better than 7th.
Third gets you on the podium.
Yeah.
At the Olympics, third gets you on the podium.
But the Google Maps and Apple Maps debacle. So let me take you back a little while. Let's go back to 2009, October 2009.
What a year.
What happened in 2009? It was just after Obama had been in for, less than a year.
Yep.
Racism was ended. Remember there was racism no longer exists? There was actually a Hungry Beast sketch where Dan Ilick said the N-word like 15 times because he's like, we're post-race now? Post-race.
Yeah.
I don't actually remember that happening, but I was shown this video like a couple of years ago of Dan Ilick saying the N-word like 15 times because the skit was about being post-race. It was on Hungry Beast.
Yeah. Well, look, open up Elon Musk's X and you will quickly learn that racism did not finish in 2009.
I guess that's what I remember about 2009 most presciently. Anyway, 2009, on Android, Google Maps released turn-by-turn directions, as in, like a friggin' turn left, to get to your destination.
Yeah.
That crap. But crucially, they did not release it for iPhone. They withheld it from the iPhone as a kind of a wedge, like, hey, how cool is this? Like Android, you get turn-by-turn directions. You can replace your Garmin.
Well, yeah, I think this was the crucial moment where it was like we were in the GPS era before people were using smartphones for navigation largely. So like having a Garmin or like a membership to one of the, you would pay for like the software, you'd pay for the device.
Yeah.
And like the maps on it could just like go out of date and you have to buy a new one.
Yeah, you go to Strathfield Car Radio.
Yeah.
And cop like $1,000 friggin' GPS thing.
Yeah.
And then, need to pay for it to be updated. But all of a sudden, if you had an Android phone in 2009...
You didn't need one anymore.
No, because it had it. And if you had an iPhone, guess what? You still got to go to Strathfield Car Radio.
It was a great wedge.
Well, it?
At the time, it probably seemed like it was.
So Apple recognized, obviously, that like this is a feature that we need to have on our phones. If they're not going to effing put it on iPhone, we need to make our own Maps product. Took them 3 years. 3 years later, September 2012. What happened in 2012?
End of the world per the Mayan calendar, apparently.
Yep, that happened. The Olympics.
Yep, London Olympics. Oh, was no Beijing? No, Beijing was 2008.
No, London was before.
Beijing was 2012.
Yeah. London with Lisa Simpson performing an act. It was the logo.
Yeah, I remember that was quite viral at the time.
I got Olympics on the brain. Anyway, Apple released Apple Maps 2012 because they were like, well, if you're not going to put turn-by-turn directions, like we need to do our own maps. And it was a laughing stock, but it had turn-by-turn directions, and it was also the default Maps product. And literally, the day that Apple released it, traffic to Google Maps from mobile dropped by 60%. Google obviously completely friggin' freaked out because they were like, oh, that's not good. Like, we would like that traffic. And hold on, this is only going to get worse. Ooh. This is only get worse. And 2 months later, they turned on turn-by-turn directions for iPhone.
Yep.
Because, as I said in my post, Google is a horizontal services business. They get their money. They're an ad network. They get their money from volume. They need people using their shit. They're not a vertically integrated hardware business that people go to because like they can only get those features there. That's not how they make money. They make money through ads. They learned a harsh lesson, especially when not long after, Apple then in Spotlight being, on your mobile phone, when you drag down, you just pull down on the main screen, or Alt space on the computer, Apple introduced search, where you could just search the web from Spotlight, and they used Bing. Google had an absolute freak out, and this came out in a bunch of discovery documents with a bunch of the Google antitrust stuff that came out. Google totally freaked out and were like, we cannot let Apple start a search engine, basically. That will be, because when you think about it, like, yes, Google is by far the best search engine. If Apple were to build a search engine, it wouldn't be nearly as good as Google, but
it'd be built in.
It would be built in. And over time, it would get better and better, much like Maps has gotten better and better and better, to the point where, like, I use Maps a bunch, primarily because of the integration. I still use Google if I'm looking like up a shop or something like that. If I'm looking at like a business, I'll use Google Maps or whatever. If I'm not looking up a business, I'll use Apple Maps.
The thing that I use, because I don't drive super often, and so I have a ancient vehicle that I drive in. It doesn't have a heads-up display.
How do you live?
It's got Bluetooth audio,
okay,
but there's no screen. Mm-hmm. So I use Apple Maps because when I'm using turn-by-turn directions from my phone, it displays on my watch.
On your watch, yeah,
and I can just see the directions on that. But what I will say is that, I mean, Apple Maps has been out for over a decade.
Yeah.
One thing they have nailed is that like the turn-by-turn directions are better than Google.
They're clearer
because they are actually like going to the second lane from the right, and like Google still hasn't nailed that. But I remember I was driving from Sydney's inner west up to Ryde. And if you're not from Sydney,
disregard.
Just let it wash over you. Picture you have to go over the Parramatta River. It's north of the bridge. But anyway, it did do it did take me down a street and try to get me to do a corner that was not possible.
It was not on.
It was literally not accessible.
I feel like Waze does that to me as well. It's like, oh, you want the quickest route? Cool. Just pull up to this like known traffic jam of some lights, go around the back streets, and then go across 4 lanes of traffic, and then cut into the huge pileup of cars that literally goes for like a kilometer. Just push into like car 3. You'll be fine.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a point where it's like, oh, all the interface stuff is really nice, but you can just tell the underlying data is just not there. And it's also like, I don't even know how Apple could get there. The infrastructure layer that powers Google Maps, I just don't think is something that Apple can ever do.
There are some network effects, in particular, I think, with the businesses, right, where you have like reviews and updates on like the times that are open and that kind of thing, whereas Apple just doesn't have any of that stuff. It uses like Yelp or Foursquare or some shit.
Yeah. And Google Maps has like the layers and layers of stuff where it extrapolates how busy a place is. Basically.
Yeah, exactly. And like
Apple does none of that stuff.
And businesses will update their Google
Yeah.
My Business
Oh, yeah, it's a
profile. Whereas, like, who's updating their Apple?
I mean,
business?
it's a telling thing that, like, but businesses go to court over and sue people over negative Google reviews.
Yeah.
That nothing like that is ever going to happen with Apple. And I think it's actually kind of funny that, like, Google has this enormous infrastructure layer that's very powerful and built up over many, many years. It's amazing. And Apple's like, you can look at a 3D model of the city.
And it looks quite beautiful.
It looks
and clean.
It looks nice. But also, I don't think I've opened it in about 8 years.
No.
It is kind of, I mean, this is only barely relevant for what we're talking about. But you do wonder now at this point where they kind of got what they wanted out of it. Or it was like at least part of their mission, which was like they backed Google into a corner and forced them to support the iPhone. Remember how they put out an apology for Apple Maps?
Yeah, because it kept driving people into the ocean.
And it was one of the reasons why Scott Forstall, who was like the boss of iOS and Apple software engineering, was forced out of the company because he refused to sign the apology letter, even though it was his responsibility. That's cold. But you do wonder, like, what is Apple's end goal here? Like,
with Maps.
Because it's been 12 years and it's not better than Google Maps.
Yeah, but I
except on certain things.
I think it's cleaner and nicer for directions to an address, and it integrates better. Like you're right. Like, is it better? No, as I said, it's not better for like find me a cafe in this area that's open.
You just know when you open, you're like, I feel like Google Maps will get me there 5% to 10% faster.
Yeah, but Google Maps looks like shit, and as I said, like in my car, I just won't because Apple Maps shows up on the heads-up display, whereas Google Maps doesn't. And that's an integration thing.
Totally.
But actually vaguely relevant, except for the fact that it's Google who are the ones who are being sued.
Yeah.
Have been judged to be doing illegal things. And we should get back to that. So the point of raising the Apple Maps thing, blah, 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 is Google were absolutely petrified of no longer being the default in search. They recognized we got completely fucked when Apple created Apple Maps and made it the default. We saw our traffic drop this much. We cannot ever allow that to happen to search. Now, they already had the Google revenue ad share agreement in place with Safari from many years prior, but it basically became an organizational priority from Discovery emails that it's like, we need to ensure, in particular now that like Apple's using friggin' Bing for Spotlight, all hands on deck, we have to be the default regardless on Apple. Like, just make it happen. You can tell that it's important because they freaking give Apple $20 billion a year for doing nothing.
But it is worth telling that, like, Apple does have its own search engine now because, like, they index their own stuff for those Safari suggestions, which appear on iOS Spotlight and Mac Spotlight. When you type in something to the Spotlight box and it gives you those first 5 results, those are indexed by Apple. And I feel like this is partially a threat from them, where it's like, we have the infrastructure, we could flick this on and make it, like, build an interface and make it a search engine. And just like you say, it's not going to be anywhere near as good, but for a lot of people on iPhone,
they're not changing the default.
They're not changing the default.
It's good enough. It's good enough. The settings app is dog shit on iPhones. It is horrible. They've allowed that thing to get insane.
Yeah.
Like, it's absolutely insane.
Apparently the new software redoes it.
Yeah, well, they've made it all in Swift UI or whatever. It's so bad on the laptop at the moment. I don't know if you've opened the new setting.
It's bad.
So bad. Point being, the judge said, you having this default deal with Apple is illegal. That's not right. What we don't have, and it's coming down in a couple of months, is the remedy. What's going to happen? And that's what we here on the Down Round podcast from 1st to 7th are going to speculate on and talk about, I think. What's going to happen? What the hell is going to happen? What are you saying? Google can't be the default on Safari, on my web browser, on my phone. And going back, I guess, another step. So Apple in the past, Bing, as you can imagine, has approached Apple and said, hey, we'd love to be the default. We'll give you some cash. In fact, allegedly, Bing offered them 100% of ad share revenue to be the default on iPhone. And Apple was like, look, that sounds great, but at the end of the day, Google's better.
We talk about this like mercenary way that Apple conducts itself, and they do, but it's also like they're not going to, A, there's the payment side of it, but B, there is a balance. They're not going to force onto their users by default a worse experience.
Yeah.
Purely for monetary reasons. That's just not really the way they conduct themselves. And I think anyone can agree that Bing is just not as good as Google. That's the whole reason that Microsoft slammed all this AI stuff into Bing before anyone else was doing it, like integrating GPT-4 directly into the Bing chat stuff, is because they know they're not better. So they needed to find like a point of difference to do it.
The ad network's also not better. I've used them all. You just get worse results for.
Yeah, no, it's
a scale thing as well, right? Google is faster. They've got the infrastructure all over the world. This is their friggin' business. It's their core competency is search. As we've said before, Google will spend $2 billion in making your search 0.1 second faster. This is what they do. They've got the whole website. They've been doing it for a very long time. It was their idea in the first place, basically.
Yeah.
Google are very good at it. And so at the end of the day, Apple are like, and also they're like, can Bing monetize our search as well as Google can? That's the other consideration. Like Google make a fuckload of money out of putting ads next to your search results in Safari. If we made Bing the default, would they make as much money as what Google does? Are they able to monetize as well? Probably not.
No.
So even at like 3 times the revenue, at 100%, it might not be as much. Number 2, I should say, Google does these deals with other browsers. Firefox gets something like 80% of their revenue from Google being the default in the same structure, the same contract. Anyway, the judge is saying you can't do it. Can't do it. You are abusing your monopoly position by making these contracts. And I have some sympathy with that position. Google are very popular because, as we said, it's the best search engine. It is what it is. It's gotten worse. It's gotten smashed with ads and blah, 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 blah. But try using another one, and it's a frustrating experience. I've tried DuckDuckGo. I wanted to like it. It's not as good. I've tried Bing. It's the default on like my work computers. It's not as good. It's annoying. Google is better. It gets weird results. You can just feel that it's not as good.
Yep.
But also, it does feel bad. Like, okay, sure, you are the dominant player, but should you be able to just like use the fact that you're a huge company in order to just like be the default so that there's no other options?
Yeah, entrench yourself.
That feels weird. That doesn't feel good. Be the best. That's fine. Own the distribution by being the best product, and everyone chooses to use you because
well, I mean,
you're
like,
good.
Think about it. If you want to become right now a new search engine, I mean, it already sounds incredibly daunting. Like, there's no startup.
No.
I mean,
apparently Apple ran the numbers and they were like, it's going to cost us around a minimum of $20 billion.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, yes, there are ones that are sort of trying to triangulate their way into being at like Perplexity, who are doing it with less investment because they use this really LLM-driven stuff, plus a whole bunch of other search APIs, their own thing they're building.
Yeah. It's like built on top of like Bing and Google, basically.
Yeah, but if you were thinking about it in a traditional search engine sense right now of like, all right, I'm a startup, I'm going to go to a VC, raise money, build a new search engine, index the web, make it legible, create some point of difference. It's like, even if you could do it, which automatically, yeah, good luck. B, let's say you make it happen. How do you even achieve the level of distribution to make that work? You couldn't.
No.
You know? At the end of the day, most people, like, I would love to know what like the proportion of total Google searches that are served through just like iOS Safari are. It would be high. It'd be a high percentage of total searches done on Google will be done through iOS Safari.
Yeah.
Which is obviously one of the reasons they want it, but it's kind of like no theoretical independent search engine can beat that.
So they already have so much locked in advantage. So it does feel a bit like, well, yeah, so should you be able to just like pay a shitload of money to just absolutely ensure that no innovation can like knock you off your seat? But then it's like, what are the remedies? The first most obvious one that comes up is like, okay, they're a monopoly, so they shouldn't be allowed to make a deal like this, and Apple has to make the deal with someone else, i.e. Microsoft or DuckDuckGo, lol. That obviously feels very weird. It's like, in order to stop monopoly, Google are not allowed to be the default search engine on Safari, and it must go to Microsoft. Like, that doesn't feel like we're really getting anywhere.
No, and I don't see that being like a remedy where they just go, Yeah, totally.
You're a monopoly, so therefore you're not allowed to commit on these contracts.
No.
I think that's probably off the table because it's too ridiculous. But, we're going to go through them. The remedies. The other one is like, Apple's not allowed to get any money for it. You're not allowed to sell default status. You just have to pick whoever the best one is. Again, feels a little bit weird. Well, Apple aren't the ones who are in trouble here which is actually on its own a bit weird. Like, I feel like Apple are the position of power here. And it's like Google are the ones who are doing something illegal. That is a little bit weird to me, but I'm not a lawyer. But yeah, like just saying to Apple, like, oh, you just need to pick based on merit and that's it. It just seems like a bit like, why? Like, maybe they should be allowed to make money.
Yeah, I mean,
but maybe not. Like, also maybe not. Like, maybe they shouldn't. Maybe it's just like, you know what? You're too powerful. You're not allowed to make money off this. So, do what you want. But regardless, that would end up with just Google still being.
It would still basically be. I mean, but also you would, and this is what you're kind of building towards, the idea that there might be like, when you first open up Safari, it goes, what would you like?
A choice screen.
Because at the end of the day, there's no benefit to Apple to just like selecting Google as the default, especially when Google are, in all other respects, a intense rival for Apple. There's no reason for them to do that if there isn't $25 billion on the table every single year.
Yeah.
They would just be like, you've taken the fucking crisp screen protector of your iPhone, you open up Safari and it throws up in the same way as it throws up like the Wi-Fi menu. Maybe during that like setup screen.
It's yet another choice.
What search engine do you want? And it goes.
Well, I think that is going to be the future. And as you say, I was going to kind of like build up to that. But I also think like one thing with the Apple isn't allowed to make money. In some ways, I think that is like, it is a good solution insofar as like, if Apple is not allowed to make money off search, they will just make their own search engine, which if they'd done that friggin' 20 years ago, we would be in a better place. Possibly. First order of effect is like, there would be a competitor to Google if Apple started building a search engine 20 years ago. And you had Apple and Google, like Apple Maps, it would get better and better. It would be shit at first. It would get better and better and better. It would be 90% of the way there. But regardless, Google would have to make their product better. If we're talking about like pure capitalism, competition or whatever, it couldn't be as busted-ified because the experience would have to be competing with Apple and trying to draw people away from Apple's internal one. Except that second order effect is, as we've kind of said, entropy, like defaults matter. And it's like, do we want Apple to then also be dominant in search as well?
Yeah,
like
totally.
Like fully verticalized. Like their ad network now has the kind of that bias of like, okay, cool, we buy all our apps through Apple, we buy all our ads through Apple. Like it's just fully verticalized. In some ways, like Google, in some ways, is the competition to Apple.
Yeah, it's a weird one to hypothesize about because I wonder, like, would Apple have had the like ability to keep a search engine competitive with Google if they had started building it 20 years ago?
Yeah,
like maybe.
I think if it was 20 years ago and the default, it'd be good enough, and it would have the scale to be able to get the network effects, to get the advertisers, to like keep perpetuating the money. They have an ad network, obviously, through like
they do,
apps and whatnot.
But there are other areas where Apple has tried to compete for a very long time, like for example, personal cloud in the form of what was originally Mobile Me and then got turned into iCloud years ago. I don't think anyone would argue that iCloud is better than Google's offering in that regard.
Yeah, but it kind of doesn't have to be. If you use a phone and have more than 1,000 photos, which everyone does, you basically have to pay for iCloud.
Yeah. But even on like the basic level of like, I have way more weird, annoying syncing issues that just happen with iCloud.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree that it's.
But like
it's weird.
It's not really their forte, building and maintaining infrastructure in the same way that building and maintaining great consumer experiences is not Microsoft's forte. And it certainly hasn't been for the past 10 years.
No, like I don't disagree, but 20 years, Apple Maps is fine. It doesn't have the network effects of like the business stuff, which just kind of goes hand in hand with search, but like it's comparable.
Yeah,
I would
no.
say for outside of the network effecty things, and like if Apple had started which I think would have been the optimal thing. That hasn't happened. That's like a fantasy.
And also it's complete. Yeah, but now it's just completely out of. It's not going to happen.
No, and as I said, as I said, this case is against Google, not Apple. But what I suspect, as you say, the actual outcome is going to be is that much like with the App Store or whatever, Apple will just say, hey, if you want to be one of the choices on the choice screen, you give us 33% of your ad revenue that you get from search. Who wants to be one of the choices on the default screen? We get a pop-up that says Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, Perplexity, Search GPT,
yeah.
or whatever, and everyone selects Google, and you end up in the situation that we're exactly in now, where Google keeps giving Apple $20 billion a year because everyone selects Google, and a few randos try DuckDuckGo and Perplexity and whatnot.
Yeah.
And we basically just end up in the same place, but with one more kind of pop-up.
Yeah, it's true. Although there is, getting EUified.
Yeah,
New things for you to click OK on. Although it does come at kind of an interesting point now where it's, we still haven't seen what effect wide access to AI LLM stuff has on the search market. It's still kind of emerging, right?
Yeah, but I think so. Where I've come down on like AI search is like I use Perplexity. I think we talked about this in my like drawer. What's it called? The app drawer, the 4 down the bottom. I have Perplexity there to try and force myself to use it because I do find it actually better for things, but by default I won't go to it. So I need to kind of have it right there and present.
Which the vast majority of people are not going to do.
It is too slow, but more importantly, Google's just doing it more and more. Google's incorporating it. They're incorporating AI summaries more and more and more, and it's faster because they have the infrastructure. Perplexity is still friggin' basically doing a Google or a Bing search, grabbing the top 10 results, sending that to a third-party API that is its own like LLM, passing that, sending it back. It takes so long. Google have their own tensor processing units friggin' in Sydney. You know what I mean? It's just going locally to Google's own data center, giving me the AI generated result and then the links. Right now, it's not as good as Perplexity. It's just not. But it's also kind of not trying to be. But it will be if need be. If people start to use Apple's friggin' inbuilt things or whatever, Google would be able to like flick that switch. I now just can't really see anyone getting close. If anyone gets close, Google can just ramp it.
Yep.
Gemini is top tier friggin' LLM. As well as we've discussed before, they have the global infrastructure. I just like can't really see anyone getting close. So point being, of this whole conversation, nothing really will change. is my prediction.
No, yeah.
Other than maybe we get one more pop up one day randomly. You open your phone and it's like, what do you want to be your default search engine? And we'll go Google, obviously.
Yeah, totally. No, I agree. I do. Yeah, I wonder if this is just like we have some antitrust action trying to smash up Google's chokehold just as we move into some new paradigm.
Yeah, there is that.
Whether it's AI or something that's kind of looks like it or is powered by it or is adjacent to it.
Yeah, in much the same way the antitrust was like looking at Facebook for having a monopoly in social, but like because it takes so long to actually get in front of court, like by the time it's in front of court, like TikTok is pretty obviously right there as like a direct competitor that's working, and it's like, and also politically, it's like, well, we don't want TikTok. We like the Facebook.
Yeah,
now.
we hate Facebook for antitrust reasons, but we very much like it on national security grounds. Yeah. And then we have a swagged out Mark Zuckerberg to defend our national interests. Yeah, totally.
But yeah, you're right. It is an interesting time where Google is being dragged in front of antitrust because of monopoly, when at the very time that there actually might be a challenge. But I honestly think that the challenges could only come from Apple. The inbuilt Apple AI that we've discussed previously, that may or may not be an actual challenger. Apple is so slow to move on. Even its ad network, which has been around for years, like it's so incremental. It's so focused on apps right now. And part of that can be, and as we've said, like right now, why would they start a search engine when they can literally, by investing no money,
get $30 billion a year?
Yeah. Why would you?
That's a great wicket. That's a phenomenal wicket, folks.
Anytime it's like, you bring up in the business meeting, should we start our own search engine? What's the business case? It's going to cost us $20 billion and the actual profit, it's unclear when it'll ever get to $20 billion a year versus we get handed.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I know what I'm choosing, folks. I'll take the cash.
Give me $25 billion right now.
A choice. I offer you a choice. Would you, dear listener, would you do nothing for $25 billion?
And there are no catches, except for a US district court judge might attack the other guy.
In 15 years' time.
In 15 years' time. Until then, you're just absorbing it.
Folks,
we've been running Down Around for a couple of years, and we're sorry to say it has come to a close for 1 week.
This is our first, even over the Christmas break, whilst we didn't record them and then put them out immediately, we did a marathon session. We still put episodes out every week, every few days. But next week we're having a week off. Having a goddamn week off.
Having a week off. No paid episode, no free episode. We'll be back the week after.
Yeah.
So if anything happens in technology in that week, figure it out yourself.
Yeah. We won't be going to trivia. No trivia updates.
Hey, Raf.
Hey, James.
Did you know that you can get an extra episode of Down Round every single week on top of the one that you're already getting?
Yeah, I knew that.
Well, yeah, obviously you know, but the person is I'm using you as a vessel to explain.
Sorry, as I'm the listener. No, go on, tell me more, James. How much does it cost?
A mere $7 a month, Raf.
Okay, where do I go to find out more about this?
You go to downround.net.
Okay, I want it.
Well, I'm sure you do.
I feel like I'm missing out by not having it.
Exactly. No ads. Second episode per week. And a few other little goodies that come in down the pipeline as well. Head to downround.net.
Downround.net.
And sign up to Downround Premium.